I do have a good one I think to end on, because I think this is going to tickle our geek button. 2 of them. It's going to tickle 2 of our geek buttons. Because the question has been asked, can a lightsaber cut Superman? So we're getting Superman geekdom, and we're getting OG Star Wars geekdom. Yeah. So, let's check it out.
Random as a blaster, an elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
Yeah, okay, I'm hearing you. Graceful, orderly, elegant, but what about the question we're all asking? Can it kill Superman? No? Is that just me?
Actually, I...
Sit down, Luthor. Somebody run the title screen.
You needed the key in that
Hello,
lightsaber
I'm
blade a
Tyler.
bit better.
This is the imaginary axis, and the short answer to my question is no. Back it up. Never gonna happen. I've run the numbers, and there's basically 0 chance even the most talented Jedi in the galaxy can get one of these things to successfully cut through Superman.
What?
In fact, weirdly enough, Clark is kind of built like one of the best anti-lightsaber weapons of all time. Almost as if he was specifically designed for the comparison. I know, right? What are the odds? Just when you think this guy already has every power imaginable, the back of his stat card reads special immunity to lightsabers. Why would he even need that? And honestly, it's kind of a shame. Superman versus lightsaber is one of those classic playground arguments. My hero could beat up your hero. A nerdier version of the unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Knowing the definitive winner somehow feels wrong. But science doesn't lie in my imagination.
But Zed, eventually it can. Like, Beskar is lightsaber resistant for sure, but it can eventually cut through Beskar. If you remember, when in The Mandalorian, when the Darksaber, when Din was defending with the Darksaber with his pure Beskar staff, it actually started glowing hot. So with enough sustained force of a lightsaber on Beskar, I think the Beskar will eventually get through the Beskar. So eventually it will. Like, it's not like, you know, it just one hit it won't, but if it's like sustained. But cortosis is cortosis is different because it creates a feedback loop in the electronics. It's not because it is a hardened metal. There's a difference with that.
Imaginary friends, and in this case, it's actually pretty interesting. Superman's unique Kryptonian biology basically takes everything the lightsaber normally uses to set itself up as an irresistible, force-channeling, magical technoblade of death, and inverts all of that to turn its most powerful components against it.
What?
But I'm getting ahead of myself. See, I think the knee-jerk reaction when tackling this problem is to treat it like a boxing match. Find the most impressive thing a lightsaber has ever cut through and compare that to the most impressive thing Superman has ever survived. And if that were all there was to it, then we might have a more complicated question on our hands. Sure, Superman survived some ridiculous punishment after nearly 90 years of non-stop publication. But you know what we've seen lightsabers slice through in pretty much every iteration of Star Wars? Everything. More or less. Some of you might be familiar with Mandalorian iron, or Beskar, if you speak the language. It's an incredibly rare substance in the Star Wars galaxy, and as far as we know, it's also the most durable thing in their universe. By some accounts, the only thing capable of damaging it is itself. This helmet has seen more than 2 generations of constant battle, but it's only barely suffered a single dint of unclear origin. The methods Mandalorian metalsmiths use to manipulate Beskar, forging it into weapons and armor.
Okay, I'm gonna say something here though. How many of you know where this dent came from in Boba Fett's helmet? How many of you are familiar with where this dent came from? No, he did not get the dent from Cad Bane. That's not where he got the dent from. He got the dent in the helmet from Chewbacca. When Chewbacca was defending Han against Boba Fett, when Boba Fett was coming after him, Chewbacca hit Boba Fett in the head and used his climbing claws, which when a Wookiee uses its climbing claws as a weapon, it is highly dishonorable. So, but this was the one time out of an act of like desperation, Chewie used his climbing claws to hit Boba Fett in the head. No, the OG. Now maybe in the newer generations they tried to twist lore. The OG lore is Chewbacca did this. That's where it came from. Yeah, so yeah, they may have retconned it, but the original lore was it was Chewie. And I think that I'm not 100% sure. I'm trying to remember it, and I think this was full-fledged. Like, the whole concept of the Mandalorian armor has evolved. Unfinished Clone Wars episode made it Cad Bane. Right. Yeah, that was the Clone Wars. Like, the lore of the dent existed prior to the Clone Wars coming out. But also, the lore of Beskar, exactly, Atanashi, that's where I was going. The lore of Beskar came about years after Star Wars came out. Years after Chewie put the dent into Boba Fett's helmet. Beskar, I think Beskar only became a thing, I'm guessing, with the Clone Wars. I'm pretty sure the Clone Wars is when they introduced the very concept of Beskar. So that's something to bear in mind. Yeah, it is the EU. I'm not even sure if it was the book EU that brought Beskar into the play, or if, like I said, if it was the Clone Wars that first introduced it. But it was not in the original, and so the lore behind this dent came to be prior to essentially the invention of Beskar. So the original lore behind the dent is Chewie. Chewie put this dent in Boba Fett's helmet because back then it wasn't Beskar. They didn't say it was Beskar yet.
Armor have mostly remained hidden throughout time as a closely guarded cultural secret. But to give you an idea of how tough it is, back in the old Legends continuity, a holocron encased in Frick managed to survive total planetary annihilation by the Death Star. The Rebel Alliance was storing it on Alderaan when the Empire decided to right-click that place out of existence. And here it is floating among the remaining space rubble moments later. No worse for wear. This stuff is widely considered the second strongest metal available when sitting next to Mandalorian iron. But with all that in mind, neither is completely immune to a lightsaber strike. Oh, they can both repel lightsabers, for a while. In fact, they're frequently used in anti-Jedi combat equipment. But ask anybody with a little fencing or sword fighting experience, they'll tell you most duels aren't going to involve more than a few brief clashes with metal on metal. Your arsenal doesn't have to be absolutely impervious to the enemies to be a good counter. Nobody's just gonna sit there and let a Jedi slowly burn through their helmet or sword during a fight
That's
anyway.
the point that I was
making. As long as you can survive momentary contact, you're good. That's all these are for, not total protection. A lightsaber can slice through anything we've seen in the Star Wars narrative, given enough time. Meaning we don't have any obvious way to estimate the blade's maximum potential. So what makes me so confident Superman is finally gonna be the one obstacle to stop everybody's favorite sci-fi superweapon dead in its tracks? Well, it all comes down to one of Clark's weird...
Yeah. I'm very curious about this because I know something that can cut Superman. So I'm waiting to hear what his argument is, because if it's no good, I have a very good counter argument for it. But I'm gonna let him cook, and let's see let's see if he has a good explanation for this.
Powers. Have you ever glanced over any of those scenes that involve Superman lifting something far in excess of his fairly normal body size, only to ask yourself, wait, what exactly is going on with the physics here? Actually, scratch that. Doesn't narrow it down at all. Everything is going on with the physics here. Einstein and Newton are rolling in their graves so fast the Flash is getting nervous. More specifically, have you ever wondered why the object Superman is holding doesn't collapse under its own weight or crumble around him? I mean, he might be strong enough to lift it, but he's still focusing all of that force into a really small surface area relative to the entire thing. He should basically just punch a hole through it, right? That's what the math says. Truth be told, that's even what Batman says. And nobody's more thorough than Batman. According to his private research documents, Bruce's favorite theory right now is that Superman reflexively projects a field of negative mass that spreads out and cradles an object when he's trying to lift it.
By the way, let me see if they're going to show this. Point of note. Well, Superman Returns was not a good Superman movie, which is what they're showing right here. Superman Returns actually addressed this. They actually addressed this exact thing. Because what you're seeing right here, yeah, he was, Brandon Routh was perfectly fine, was a perfectly good Superman. I had zero problem with Brandon Routh as Superman. It was just the story was shit. The story and the writing for Superman Returns was shit. Brandon Routh was very good as Superman. Yeah, the script was just absolute dog shit. This plane is going down, okay? The scene preceding this moment. This plane is going down. Engine failure or something, I forget what. Superman flies up and basically is on the wing of the plane, pushing counter to either, I forget, from the underside or pushing to straight against it to stop it from falling. You know what happens? The wing snaps off because he's pushing at that point, that hinge point of the wing and the fuselage, and the wing snaps off. So they actually addressed. It is one of the only times in Superman they actually address that, where he's at a specific point on an object and the force of said object has catastrophic failure because of that. And yes, right here, the nose crumples when he's lowering to the ground. So this is one of the few or only Superman pieces of fiction that actually does address this very thing that he is criticizing. I just thought that was a fun, interesting bit of trivia.
The weight and protecting them both from forces like inertia and momentum. Negative mass is this weird hypothetical property that only really seems to exist in exotic matter, used in fancy theoretical physics equations.
Yes, exactly right.
That it behaves like
I said, he did with the weight.
Anything with regular mass. For example, we know every object in the universe with mass pulls matter toward it. That's how gravity works. But something with negative mass would push matter away from it instead. Projecting and controlling his own personal field of that stuff would do more than augment Superman's already impressive strength and durability. It would explain how he rescues people from falling without killing them, how he handles normal objects at super speed without causing them to burst into flames, or even how he and Lois Lane safely, yeah. Exotic matter's also unique in that it's currently a necessary ingredient for humanity's best possible models on theoretically achieving faster-than-light flight.
Well, actually, Albert, the Homelander airplane scene, he says it differently. He doesn't say I would have tore a hole. I don't think he said I would tear a hole through the fuselage. He said, what the hell would I stand on? Because I forget who the female character was. I forget her code name. She says, like, can't you just, like, lift the airplane? And he says, what the hell would I stand on? The plane is in midair. Him being able to fly, Queen Maeve, thank you. Yeah, Queen Maeve is like, can't you just, like, lift the airplane? And his response is, what am I going to stand on? Him being able to fly does not mean he can exert force upwards. Like, does not mean he can lift heavy objects because he doesn't have enough opposing force when he flies to lift. That was it. That was how they addressed that in The Boys. Is that when he's flying, he doesn't have any, like, it's like, yeah, he can't use his self-propulsion to function as an equal and opposite resisting force for lifting objects. So different take on it, but still kind of works with the science in a really cool way that says, yeah, what Superman can do doesn't really work that way. So he can fly because he can move himself, but it's not like he's creating like an invisible. I think the way that they were viewing the way they were working the science is, well, his ability to fly allows himself to move through the air, and he can carry other people, but in terms of doing opposing force, his flight does not produce enough
Wouldn't Superman bust it with
rearward
the force of like a
resistance.
50 BMG?
Well, Chinito, that's kind of what he was saying earlier, why him and Lois Lane were able to, you know, is this opposing force thing. And probably more like a howitzer than a 50 BMG Chinito. Yeah, it's like I forget how they tried to explain it like in The Boys, but basically it was something along the lines of he had no rear like a rear projective resistance that would allow him to lift the plane. I can't remember exactly how they tried to explain it, but I'm bare bonesing the shit out of it, but that was why he said he couldn't lift the plane when Queen Maeve was saying like, can't you just lift the plane so it can and carry it down to Earth. It was that, it was that rationale. Now, Hilton Lander was always weaker than Omni-Man, Revit. I mean, that's a given.
Or time travel, both of which are things we know Superman can do under his own power. It's a reasonable assumption, but at the end of the day, Batman's just speculating about the specifics of this force that Superman's clearly manipulating when he moves large objects. Other leading scientists have also confirmed something's there, but they usually call it his bioelectric aura. Apparently it's fairly complex and difficult to analyze. Nobody's been able to firmly classify the phenomenon in its entirety. There's definitely room for negative mass in the equation, but we also have good evidence there's an electromagnetic component as well. Maybe it's both. Superman demonstrates just as much resistance to energy attacks as he does physical assault. Heck, Desaad once said he thinks Superman's bending space itself around his body. Whatever this thing is, it's definitely covering its bases. When charged with enough energy, Kryptonians have been seen expanding and manipulating their personal complex field to affect things from a distance, almost like a form of telekinesis.
Really?
Superman can...
Whoa. I am not up on Superman lore, but... What the hell? Okay.
Superman can push his aura outward to damage any surroundings, build constructs, or even take apart machines. In a passive state, it radiates just beyond his skin until something dips too close, and sorry to disappoint all the wannabe Sith Lords out there, but this bioelectric negative mass literal plot armor is the first thing that's gonna stop you from ever killing Superman with that lightsaber. Because for all the talk we've had about the sheer devastating relentlessness of the galaxy's most versatile, force-sensitive weapon, there is one thing lightsabers have always struggled to cut through since their very first appearance. Other lightsabers.
It's energy. And it's not only lightsabers. Don't forget, in episode 1, the Duel of the Fates scene, when those energy shields came up, when Qui-Gon and Darth Maul were fighting, and they were going through that corridor of the force shields that would engage and then disengage on a timer, they couldn't cut through those. Darth Maul actually hit one with his lightsaber and it just bounced off. So it's energy shields too. And blaster bolts, which blaster bolts are not exactly, at least to my knowledge, are not energy, they're plasma. That's the thing about blaster bolts. It's not like just shooting like bursts of lasers. Blaster bolts are plasma, so those are like, it's like superheated gas, essentially plasma, so that's like physical. So, and they've never tried to cut through it. They just block it. Yeah, the electro staffs wielded by Magna Guards. Although, again, we've never seen what sustained impact on those would do. Like, they've just done, like, glancing blows in the course, like, through the course of doing, like, sword fighting. We've never seen what blocking and then actual sustained pressure with the lightsaber on one of those would do. Yeah. So, it's the one thing, it's just energy shields or energy fields in general is something that could stop a lightsaber.
These things look complicated. But lightsabers are personal weapons. For the most part, every Jedi has one or two that belongs to them alone. And creating your own lightsaber is part of the Jedi tradition to ensure maximum battle proficiency. So it's rare to find two that look exactly alike. As a result, the inner mechanisms can be fascinating.
Very much so, 504,
Some variety
very
is
much.
practically guaranteed from builder to builder, but components...
Okay, the Disney lightsabers are light bats. Okay, those are not lightsabers. They are literal light bats that you just bonk people with. And don't even get me started on modern day Disney lightsabers. Don't even try it.
Components also have to remain relatively consistent to ensure the weapon works right. This makes certain weaknesses unavoidable. Like, I don't care how crazy the car you just built is, I know it has an engine somewhere. It has to. That's not something you can modify out of the process. And lightsaber blades have to bounce off of other lightsaber blades. It's part of a necessary function that keeps the device operational. But maybe all this would be easier to understand if we took a moment to step back, open the hood ourselves, and look a little closer at the details. See, every lightsaber draws energy from a power cell, usually located in the bottom half of the hilt. The power field conductor and inert power insulator make sure the energy travels up to the following chamber with as little loss as possible, channeling it toward a specially chosen, delicately placed kyber crystal. Practically nothing in the battery bleeds off to non-essential parts of the weapon. Kyber crystals are unique. Permutations found within the kyber lattice bear similarities to the neural patterns of a functioning brain, and they've been compared to living cells. These crystals bridge the gap between organic and inorganic, exhibiting a sort of semi-sentience and a natural connection to the Force. There isn't anything like it in the galaxy. When properly prepared, they'll respond to an influx of energy by amplifying it and creating a type of plasma, which is then concentrated into a tight, narrow beam by the focusing array.
Okay, I don't think I knew about them being having a level of consciousness. That would explain why every lightsaber is very unique and has very unique properties. Yeah, and it's like the whole concept of bleeding the crystals. Yeah. Well, okay, I thought, and maybe this changed, that red lightsabers were made out of synthetic crystals. That the lightsabers used by the Sith did not that kyber crystals did not come naturally red, and that most Sith used a synthetic version of a kyber crystal. That's what I always thought. Now, there is like the supposed thing of where you can bleed a kyber crystal, which I think may be a Disney thing. Yeah, in the Legends one, yeah. And then I'm not sure if it was Disney that did the whole concept of being able to bleed a kyber crystal, thereby corrupting it and turning it red. I think. Oh, I mean, for God's sake, 504. What's her name? Jaden's love interest during Jedi Academy built hers out of a fucking animal horn. But she literally used an animal horn to build the hilt of her saber. So yeah, you can build the hilt of the saber out of literally anything. The set did in fact create a way to make synthetic crystals since they lost the connection to the natural crystals, yeah? Okay, Yard Dog, are you talking about the whole Disneyfication that if they fall to the dark side, they'd bleed their crystal? Yeah, I think that one is, yes, 504, it was, I forget the name of the character, but it was a Wookiee character from the Jedi, from the Jedi Academy book series. I forget the Wookiee's name, but yeah, they created they had a wood handle. So, that Jedi, okay, so basically, yeah, Disney, Vilbaka, thank you, Leo, yes. So yeah, so Disney basically, they did what they've done from the very beginning, and totally fucked up the canon. Which is why everybody hates the Disney versions. And yes, Jay, you are correct. Luke got married to Mara in the EU, and Mara actually, I think, was poisoned. And I think, yeah, if memory serves, Mara Jade got poisoned, but she used her connection to the Force to stave off that poison as long as possible, but eventually she did die before Luke. Okay. No, Yard Dog, let's not fuck with it. Mace's saber is purple because motherfucking Samuel Jackson wanted a purple goddamn lightsaber. He said to George Lucas, I want a purple lightsaber, and he Samuel motherfucking Jackson, so he said, sure, you get a purple lightsaber. Let's not fuck with that, okay? Maybe they wrote the canon around it, but it was 100% because it was Samuel L. motherfucking Jackson.
Normally, something like this would violate the first law of thermodynamics, but the crystal isn't just making more energy out of nothing, it's drawing it from every living thing in the universe.
I know, Tonito, I know.
The Force exists all around us. We live in it and move through it. It flows through us and binds the galaxy together. As for the plasma, that stuff's far from a made-up sci-fi buzzword that sounds like it belongs on a heavy metal cover from the 90s. In case you haven't heard, plasma is actually the most common state of matter in the universe. By a long shot. But it's also the least popular and fifth.
Wait. Mara was killed by Jason? And you misspelled it, by the way. Unless autocorrect fucked with you, Deadly Mouse, in which case I understand. Yeah, it's Jacen was his name. But I thought she got poisoned before Jason turned to the dark side. I thought that the poison got introduced to her back when the kids were still in the academy. Or am I goofing up my timeline? Oh, she lived through that. Okay. So she lived through the poisoning. She was able to defeat the poisoning, and then Jason actually killed her during his whole thing. Okay. Yeah, I have not read a lot of the the Legends books. I have not read a lot of them. But the one thing I remember was that she did get poisoned. I didn't read too much after that.
Grade science class because teachers tend to focus on solid, liquid, and gas. That's right, there's a fourth one. And we banned it from the curriculum because it just makes things more complicated. If you really want to get annoying about it, some people say matter has 6 states or 7 or more, but we're not here for that. Most of you probably know that you can heat a solid until it becomes a liquid, and you can heat a liquid until it becomes a gas. Well, plasma is what happens when you heat a gas until it becomes so excited that its electrons break away from their atoms, resulting in a high-energy cocktail of unbalanced positive nuclei, or ions, and unbound negative electrons. The key word there being unbound. Plasma by its very nature is composed of heavily charged, free-floating subatomic particles, meaning it's really responsive to things like magnets or electricity. And that's where the rest of the lightsaber comes in. Using a combination of various magnetic fields, the blade is created by accelerating plasma through the emitter matrix, stabilizing it, and containing it within an unseen permeable shaft of energy that repels the substance from all sides, eventually forcing its arc back into the hilt through a negatively charged high-energy flux aperture acting as the path of least resistance. That's right, just like Superman earlier, the lightsaber is also surrounded by an invisible field of energy that no one ever talks about. Otherwise, it'd basically be an uncontrollable plasma hose.
People kind of do talk about it. I've heard before that basically the core of the lightsaber is white. Every lightsaber blade's core is white. The energy field that he was just referring to is what gives the lightsaber its different color. So the kyber crystal basically is creating the energy field around the plasma core. And pretty much as I understand it, when the lightsaber comes into contact with a physical object, that breaks the energy field, maintaining the core's length. Oh, they do that. They do come in different colors. Yeah, the basic, yeah, and the different crystals can also give it different properties and everything. But it's the energy field, like the energy field can be broken by contact with a physical object, in which case and that's when the plasma goes to fucking town.
Death Star can really hurt Superman, because it also destabilizes anything that is hit.
Possibly. I mean, don't forget the Death Star's super laser was facilitated through kyber crystals. Don't forget that the kyber crystals is what facilitates the super laser. Anyway, back to my point, is the energy field breaks when it comes to contact with physical, that allows the plasma to go to town on whatever it connects with, and then once the connection ceases, the energy field snaps back into place. And then when the lightsabers connect against one another, the energy fields don't break because it's basically like doing two positively charged magnets. That's how I always understood the technology behind the lightsaber blade itself.
That no one ever talks about. Otherwise, it'd basically be an uncontrollable plasma hose. Except plasma behaves more like a gas than a liquid, so you'd be on fire, your enemy would be on fire, and everything would be on fire because the room exploded. At first glance, the main difference between Superman's barrier and the lightsaber barrier seems to be that Kryptonian cells want to keep things out, while lightsabers don't really care what passes through as long as the plasma stays in. And that's what makes one great for punching and the other great for slicing. But there are exceptions. Specifically, when it comes to the lightsaber, these things really struggle against other electromagnetic fields, like deflector shields or combat shields, electro staffs, electro swords. The problem isn't that the blade can't melt its target, it's that it never gets an opportunity. The field a lightsaber uses to keep its plasma contained repels other electromagnetic charges. That's why you never see one blade slice through another during gridlock. It's like pushing two magnets together. Even this basic...
What did I say? What did I say? No, I have not watched this video, but holy crap, what did I just say? Hey, I like me my science.
Non-lethal Z6 riot control baton, definitely not designed for fighting Jedi, can successfully counter lightsaber strikes thanks to its electric current. If there was any way to modify the lightsaber so that you
that's
could
a
pass through your opponent's blade during combat,
it.
the Sith would absolutely have done that by now. What we're really comparing is a notoriously obstinate, consciously controlled energy barrier, known for pushing back against everything from bullets to lasers to doomsday, versus a powerful blade of plasma contained within a field specifically known for struggling against other energy barriers. The most likely outcome, by far, is that your lightsaber bounces off of Superman the same way it would bounce off of another lightsaber. You're gonna see a glowing effect at the point of contact, might even hear that classic lightsaber clashing sound, but Superman won't feel a thing, because you're not even technically touching him. That might seem anticlimactic at first, the same could pretty much be said for trying to hit him with a stick, but the lightsaber is unique, because your weapon isn't just being repelled by Superman's natural biology, it's also being repelled by the weapon itself. You've unironically chosen one of the worst possible things to attack this guy with. The stick would be more effective. That being said, Superman's field doesn't just block everything. He can choose to wrap it around others, of course, and most of his greatest weaknesses are rooted in elements that can pass through without any resistance at all. Actually, now that we're on the topic, it's probably a good time for me to mention that the Force isn't magic. And if you won't take my word for it, then try asking High Republic Jedi Knight Gela Natai.
Wait. Where is this getting sourced from? Evil? I suspect, based on the logic we have presented, if you basically put an unignited lightsaber against Superman and ignited it, you as the wielder would get pushed backwards. as the blade extended. I think it might turn on, but you would end up getting pushed backwards as the blade extended out. That's what I suspect might happen in the situation, possibly. Now, as far as this shit goes, if this is not the new High Republic that just came out, this new, like, young adult series, if that's what this High Republic thing is bullshit, and I count it as not canon. Okay? I'm sorry, everything Disney has put out is bullshit. The video is 8 months old. So it very well could be the new High Republic young adult series that is that this is referencing. Yeah. So no, well, here's the thing. The Force, no one knows what the fuck the Force is, and that's what made it so awesome. The Force is just this intangible thing that certain people can wield. It's essentially like if you look at it from a magical perspective. Okay? Think of like the magic users you've seen in fiction that basically view magic as the threads woven through absolute reality. And mages or witches or whatever denomination of magic user you can think of can basically, the way they use magic is by working with the threads of reality in certain ways. That is kind of how I've always viewed the Force, not in a magical way, but in the same vein of what the Force is. The Force is literally everything, and Force users are able to weave those threads of reality, i.e. the Force. But it's always been a very nebulous, unknown quantity, and that's what made it so cool, because it's nothing you could actually defy. Until Disney got its hands on, or actually until George Lucas fucking did midichlorians.
Or the shaman, witch, and dark sorceress Mother Talzin. Magic can occasionally bypass Superman's bioelectric aura if it's been supernaturally designed to ignore opposing forces and the scientific
Force is
principles that they
basically a
operate
natural
on.
phenomenon that was discovered and harnessed by sentient beings.
Essentially, I mean, the Force is considered to be in everything. It's basically this unknown energy that is infused into literally everything in all of reality. And yeah, so it's not just biological things. It's literally infused into everything. And that's why I said it's like akin to the magic users that basically work with the threads of reality to cast spells. Well, yeah, I know midichlorians are basically midichlorians are, I forget exactly how they defined it as basically the individual's ability to sense and manipulate this force.
Like a sword enchanted to cut through any barrier. But that's obviously not what the Force is. The Force is a natural energy field generated by all living things. A fundamental aspect of existence, similar to how certain philosophies characterize consciousness, aura, ki, or even the universe itself. That might sound like an arbitrary distinction to somebody born and raised in the modern West, where reality is still mostly understood through Enlightenment-era thinking, but it boils down to this. Real magic actually exists in the Star Wars galaxy, and it's almost always treated as something different from the Force. Plenty of rituals, spells, and incantations don't have anything to do with tapping into the Force.
I'm going to disagree with this. Just like I disagreed with when they were talking about, the bullshit with the acolyte, with it's still it's all the Force. It's just being used by a different name. The Force is the most widely known label for this. Yeah, and I'll tell you, that's where I'm going with this. Don't worry, I got you, fam. I got you. The source is just simply the most commonly used label for this, for whatever it is you perceive this as. That is its most commonly used label. The magic that is used by something like the Dathomir witches or other cultures or other species that use quote unquote magic is still using the Force. They just have a different name for it. It's all the Force. They just have a different name for it, and they have a different methodology of tapping into it. That's the thing. Yeah, it's all this nebulous energy that is in everything in reality is infused with. The Jedi the Jedi and the Sith call it the Force, witches of Dathomir call it magic. Other societies, other religions, other races, other species may call it something, 50 million different things, but it's all the same thing. It just has a different label for it. That's it. So magic only exists in Star Wars in that they are calling their methodology of harnessing this nebulous energy source magic instead of calling it the Force. That's it. Yeah, and Sith sorcery is common in the EU. Again, it's just a terminology to basically express, Sith sorcery because I think they use the methodology in which they utilize their Force by, instead of just through meditation, they're using like science and chemistry and alchemy, and they're using that as a means of harnessing the Force to get what they want. That's it. That's really it. And Evo, thank you for the follow.
Sometimes they do ask you to tap into the Force, but only if it's one of multiple steps and ingredients. The best argument you could make is that magic is some sort of unusual manifestation of the Force that most Jedi can't normally access. And we don't have especially good evidence that the lightsaber blade incorporates pure Force.
Wait, the various other systems are designated as internal power from the individual versus the Force, which is harnessing the natural element field. Wait. No, it's still the same thing. It's just some individuals are able to attune to it using their own internal mind as the guidance, whereas some their attunement is basically to basically facilitate the attunement to it because they are not trained or they don't have the discipline to just strictly go from their minds. They use external forces to essentially focus themselves. It's a means of achieving that focus in order to use the Force. Because they have not learned how to focus it simply by sheer will. So it's kind of like, okay, think of it like two different ways of using magic, okay? I've read books before where some magic users literally just through mental command cast a spell. Whereas other magic users actually need to go through incantations, they actually need to go through rituals, and so, or they have to do something in order to facilitate this magic. It's not because they don't have the capacity to use magic, it's because through either their training or their ability to use it is more limited than those that can literally just snap it out at will, and they use these external trappings as a means of facilitating focus in order to use the magic. That's basically all this is.
Force energy into its cutting power anyway, so there's just no reason to think this weapon will cut through Superman any easier than a regular laser sword designed by Brainiac, Batman, or Lex Luthor. But there is one other possibility worth considering. Kryptonite. Bad news, you can't just use this to power a lightsaber. Like we mentioned earlier, lightsabers only work because they're designed around the unique properties found within kyber crystals specifically. Kryptonite's clearly not the same thing, and it lacks most of the features that a lightsaber would normally capitalize on during standard operation. If you loaded this stuff into the hilt instead, you'd basically just be shooting energy into a rock, which might fry the entire device. But none of that's a deal breaker, because get this, Superman isn't weak to kryptonite in the first place. Not strictly speaking. What he's really weak to is
radiation.
Radiation. And that nuance has the potential to completely change this conversation. See, every possible manifestation of electromagnetic energy can be charted on a spectrum according to wavelength and frequency, ranging from the long wavelength low frequency radio wave to the short wavelength high frequency gamma ray.
Yes, I was actually thinking the same, but you could use other crystals to enhance the kyber crystal, or we've seen synthetic crystals made, so it's entirely possible that either a kyber crystal and a Kryptonian crystal or Kryptonite crystal could be fused, or you could create a synthetic crystal with both the properties of a kyber crystal and the properties of a Kryptonite crystal. There are probably a couple dozen ways to do it in the Star Wars universe.
This electromagnetic spectrum encompasses everything that isn't gravity or one of the two nuclear forces. Meaning somewhere along the
different kind of
continuum,
radiation,
we should be able to find whatever radiation Kryptonite's giving off. And we should also be able to find the radiation lightsabers are using to keep their plasma contained in the shape of a blade. Usually when we're talking about harmful radiation, we're primarily interested in the amount of energy it carries. The lower end of the spectrum is basically safe, the higher end very, very dangerous. Humans aren't typically bothered by radio waves, microwaves, infrared, or anything in the visible light range. But once you start soaking up that ultraviolet stuff, too much of that over a long enough period of time can damage your DNA, eventually resulting in cancer and other health problems. X-rays, those are even worse. And gamma rays are practically nothing but bad news. They're the reason Ground Zero of the Chernobyl disaster probably won't be habitable for thousands of years. So upon first glance, the question looks pretty simple. We find the frequency for kryptonite, find the frequency for lightsabers, and if kryptonite sits on a lower part...
Well, Tanashi, it depends on the writer. I've seen, what was it, like Lex Luthor was infusing himself with kryptonite in one, like, special, and he was getting poisoned by it, so kryptonite absolutely can harm humans with prolonged exposure to it. Yes, they absolutely can. And yeah, Zeb, I was gonna say the same thing. It's like Chernobyl has been healing. There is life is, continuing in Chernobyl. It's not like it's granted the Russian government's probably keeping them away for God knows what other reasons. But yeah, it's Chernobyl is starting to become livable again.
Part of the spectrum, then we can safely assume lightsabers are harmful to Superman, right?
Whoop, hang on.
Pretty simple. We find the frequency for kryptonite, find the frequency for lightsabers, and if kryptonite sits on a lower part of the spectrum, then we can safely assume lightsabers are harmful to Superman, right? Well, it's not that easy. The problem is Superman encounters different types of radiation all the time. He's constantly fighting supervillains with all manner of convoluted death rays and laser guns. He's taken nuclear explosions to the face. He can even be found chilling inside the sun on occasion. But perhaps most notably of all, it's a well-known fact that Superman travels for long periods of time through deep space with nothing but the clothes on his back. Doesn't need a ship, doesn't need a suit, doesn't need an atmosphere. There's no way he isn't getting bombarded with all kinds of cosmic radiation during these trips. But he comes back just fine. In short, kryptonite can't be Superman's trademark weakness just because it releases an energy signature too far on the spectrum for his...
The thing with Superman is his power set is wildly unstable because it literally depends on who is writing the story. Lightsabers have a pretty firmly established canon within the legends. Again, I don't count Disney. But lightsabers have a pretty solidly established legend, established canon of how they work how they cut through things and why they cut through things. With Superman, it's correct, Cortas. It does depend on it. The same goes for every superhero in existence ever, and will continue to do so. So, like, sometimes Superman can fly through space completely unassisted. Sometimes he flies in a ship. Sometimes he flies with a spacesuit. It literally depends on who is writing for him. That's it. So yeah, it's you need to pick a version of Superman.
His body to handle. He's been all up and down that spectrum with relatively few complications. So his reaction to this radiation in particular must have something to do with the very specific range it occupies. Makes things harder for the lightsaber, but not impossible. That's how Godzilla managed to beat Superman during their first confrontation, by giving off an energy signature similar to Kryptonite.
Really? No. Godzilla beats Superman because the writers said we want Godzilla to kick Superman's ass. Let's not fuck with it. Godzilla's radioactive blast is not similar to Kryptonite. And, Alex, I'm very aware this was a thing. I do know this was a fairly recent comic where Godzilla showed up, fought Superman, and Superman went to go save a child, and Godzilla tanked its breath. Or Godzilla basically did the radioactive breath and dropped Superman. But Godzilla's radiation is literally earthbound radiation. It is not kryptonite. I will flat out say this. Godzilla's radiation is not similar to kryptonite. Okay? This is just writer for Justice League for Godzilla. I'm sorry. I don't buy that. This is again, this is a writer making an excuse of why Godzilla took down Superman. Like, if you want to, Cortez, like, I know that there are lightsaber crystals that aren't kyber crystals. Well, and point of fact, what's her name? The girl that Jason was with during Jedi Academy, I forget her name for the life of me. She actually lost her fucking arm because she put a flawed crystal. She put a non-pure crystal into her lightsaber, and when she ignited it, the fucking thing blew up and tore her arm literally off. So yeah.
Kryptonians are like big cosmic sponges. They may look human, but their cells are vastly different from anything found on Earth. They're capable of absorbing, storing, and processing absurd levels of energy, with no clear limit to the amount or type. And they can do it so well that they often violate that pesky first law of thermodynamics by giving off more than was initially put in. How do they do it? Nobody knows. But Superman's powers are a manifestation of yellow solar energy that his body's been stockpiling and using as fuel. Kryptonite radiation seems to somehow interrupt that process and starve his cells to death. It functions more like carbon monoxide poisoning than standard radiation sickness. Human cells run on oxygen, for comparison. When air is pulled into your lungs, that oxygen binds to a protein called hemoglobin, which distributes it throughout your body via the bloodstream. But carbon monoxide can also bind to hemoglobin. It has a higher affinity for doing so than oxygen, and it forms a stronger bond. Meaning if both gases are present in your system, not only does carbon monoxide get priority, but it stays attached to the hemoglobin for longer, preventing it from transferring anything else. Too much carbon monoxide, and eventually no oxygen is being distributed anywhere in your body, causing you to slowly suffocate. It's difficult to know the precise wavelength and frequency that gives us kryptonite radiation, but we do have a few clues. For starters, kryptonite is almost always described as radioactive, meaning it's made up of unstable atoms that are trying to shift to a more stable configuration by slowly releasing particles.
Correct, Revan. It does not.
Secondly, Superman's cells can't absorb the radiation if it's hidden behind a barrier of lead, but it has to be lead or something equally dense. And perhaps most importantly, we know kryptonite isn't entirely harmless to humans because Lex Luthor once developed cancer after prolonged exposure to the stuff. Take all
Yep,
these
there we go.
factors into account, and we start closing in on an answer. A radiation signature that might be found in certain nuclear weapons. That just happens to overlap with Godzilla's atomic breath. From Alpha to Omega, there's
There we
no
go.
question about it. Kryptonite lies somewhere on the gamma spectrum. Where
Yeah.
on the gamma spectrum? Not sure. But it doesn't matter because this just isn't where the lightsaber is. Radiation in this section is dangerous, and not exclusively when you're being stabbed with it. If the Jedi were using gamma radiation to keep their blades functional,
It is.
then the lightsaber wouldn't be an
Depends
effective
on where
weapon.
his gamma radiation
Warriors
is on the
would become
spectrum,
weak
Revan.
and frail by using them too often. Innocent people would end up in the hospital just because they were standing next to a Jedi that was probably trying to protect them. All those non-fatal lightsaber injuries we see throughout the series would suddenly become lethal weeks after healing because cancer would tear through the victim's body. The only remaining option, the only way your lightsaber is going to make contact with Superman at all, is if the wavelength and frequency it gives off matches the energy type that he actively absorbs. And if that happens, then stabbing Superman would probably make him stronger, which is literally the opposite of what stabbing somebody normally does, but maybe that's for the best. Did you know kyber crystals are never naturally red? Some glow green, some blue. In fact, they can be a wide variety of colors, but they only shift to red after being forcefully dominated through a process called bleeding. It's a cruel
That's a
and twisted
Disney
ritual
thing.
that involves a Sith pouring all of his hate into the crystal, breaking its will because these things won't normally cooperate with the dark side. This isn't a weapon designed to hurt people. It's designed to protect. It's powerful, terrifying, virtually unstoppable, but good. So is it really so strange that it can't hurt Superman? They're practically cut from the same cloth. Heck, Superman absorbing it almost makes the most sense. If this thing's really built around the same radiation that gives Superman his powers, then the Jedi are basically defending the galaxy with essence of Superman. And that wouldn't be out of place in the slightest, because no matter who you are, no matter where you are, in the sprawling streets of Metropolis or the distant planet of Tatooine, if you're in danger and you see one of these in the distance, you're seeing hope. And that's pretty super. May the Force be with you. Or instead of being with the Force, you could stick around with me for a while. We're picking up brand new content
Oh yeah,
for the Imaginary
absolutely,
Axis, and
Deadly.
you'll hear about it soon.
They did.
So why not take a minute to brush up on some of our classics? Personally, I'm a big fan of this study we did on Darkseid a while back, but all the videos are good. And that's why we're making more of them. Let us know about potential topics. Seriously, don't be shy. And subscribe to see if your suggestion is chosen next. See you soon.
Right. Well, some disagreement about a few things on those, but overall, I liked it. I thought it was fun. Now, what I kept in my back pocket for that whole video. Chat, do you know what can cut Superman? There is one thing that can cut Superman. And no, it's not a Kryptonian scalpel from Star Labs. And this one actually got the shit finest out of it. Look. Grindhouse? Naughty. No. There is a weapon. Logan's claws. Wolverine can cut Superman. And this was scienced. Yes, it was scienced. Kyle Hill actually scienced it. Logan's claws, adamantium, has such a tiny cut point. I forget exactly the phrasing you use, but adamantium can cut on such a tiny atomic level. It's so sharp, it cuts at such a small atomic level, it can actually cut Superman. Because atomically speaking, that's why Superman is so tough. He is atomically very dense. And adamantium cuts at such a fine atomic level, it can actually cut through Superman. So yes, if Logan was able to hit Superman with his claws, he could cut Superman with his claws. Just thought I'd throw that out there at the end. Basically, Josh, well, I don't think the whole aura thing was taking into a factor. It was the density of his Kryptonian molecules. Well, Black Panther uses vibranium, not adamantium. Vibranium is not the same as adamantium. Basically, Actinito, Hulk can just basically swing Logan around like a sword with his claws popped out. And yes, I know, it's only if Superman let him cut him. I fully appreciate that. Yeah, fastball special, a la Hulk? Yeah.